What's one secret you and a parent have kept from the other parental figure? My mom used to send my dad into my room to spank me. He would whisper to me that we were going to play a little pretend game to make my mom happy. He would tell me he was going to clap his hands, and I needed to pretend to cry like I was being spanked. I really didn't realize how awesome my dad was for doing that until much later in life. His own dad was pretty abusive to him, and he couldn't stand the thought of hitting a kid because of it. When my daughter was 4, she really wanted to play with the strings of magnetic balls I had on my desk. I know they say for children over the age of 12, but she was having a really good time. She came up to me about 20 minutes later meekly saying, "Daddy," and I could see that the bottom of one was sticking out her nose. Not knowing how many were up there, I gently used bigger magnets I had to coax the whole string out. Was decided to never share any of that incident with Mom. Edit. Thanks everyone for the kind words. I'm kind of overwhelmed, but I really appreciate it. I got lucky and found a Wii for Christmas the year it came out. But it was for me from my parents. Anyways, one day I'm home from school and Dad was home from work. We opened it, played Wii Sports all day and put it back before Mom came home. Fuck, I miss him. I rented Mike Tyson's Punch-Out when I was in 7th grade and kept it out until I owed $47. My mom slipped me the money to pay it off so my dad wouldn't go crazy about the money, which was a lot of money for us back then. If he'd found out, he would have prohibited me from renting games for a while. I don't think he knows about it even now. This one time I forgot to lock my door one night and a drunk guy walked into my place. After I, politely, kicked him out, I called my dad and he was like, "Yeah, no, don't tell your mother, you'll give her a heart attack." My mom worked days, and my dad was on midnight shift. So meals were my dad's responsibility that week. One day, instead of cooking dinner, he took me to a funeral of an old teacher of his that had passed away, so that I could eat those little sandwiches, cheese and desserts. First time I got drunk at a party. I was hammered and was scared to take a cab. Then I remembered my mom telling me I could always call her for help and she'd be there with no consequences. I called her and she picked me up. All she did was make sure I was safe and had enough water to not get as bad a hangover as I was going to. No blaming me for waking her up at 3 a.m. No chiding, just telling me she was proud of me for calling her for help. My dad, who'd most likely have a panic attack at the thought of me having been drunk, still thinks I was picked up because I was sleepy instead. Thanks, Mom. My sisters and I found fantasy love letters to other men besides my father. I know they were fantasy because she didn't even know half of them and some were happily married. They were all about her wanting to run off with these men and have their baby, and she had a hysterectomy after her last pregnancy. She would write them and wad them up and just throw them wherever. I'm surprised my father never found them. My youngest sister would scream at her, "Are you insane, mother?" We just thought she was unhappy with my father and never said anything to him about it. I'm the one who got those massive dents in the back of the car when I was 17, backing into the other car they owned. It was not a parallel parking hit and run. I once took my kids to get ice cream. They were like, I dunno, 3 or 4. And I told them, "Don't tell mommy I took you for ice cream." So the second my wife comes in the door, one of them says, "Daddy took us to get ice cream, but we can't tell you." Thanks, traitor. My dad had me take a DNA test cause he didn't believe when my mom said I was his daughter. He didn't tell my mom. The gingerbread cookies on the balcony. Yay. Some of it was eaten by the birds, but not all of it. Sorry, Mom. That when her mother died it was not gently in her sleep. It was horrific and I had to tell the doctors that her wish was no life-saving efforts. My mom and dad were arguing over what shade of brown to paint the house. My mom wanted a lighter color, too light in my and my dad's opinion, and dad and I wanted a darker color, of course, too dark in my mom's opinion. Well, when we had the painters come, they painted one side of the house in a lighter brown. My dad and I took one look and said make the rest of the house darker, so they did. My mom came home and fawned over how great the house looks, not knowing 3 of the 4 sides of the house were not the color she wanted. That one lighter side is up against a bunch of trees and is close enough in color to the rest so it's impossible to tell unless you look for it or know it already. It's our secret and we will never tell. But everyone is happy with the house color. Lol. My stepdad and mom broke up. The day that my mom left, taking me with her, I went back into the house to say goodbye. I got along well with him. My mom is a bit crazy. I was young, middle school age. He was devastated and broke down, first crying. He told me that he had never told anyone this, but the reason he had issues getting along with my mom was because he was assaulted as a child, and he was sorry. He made me promise not to tell her or anyone. I never did. I always wondered if I should tell her, but keeping his secret was the only thing I could do for him, and I still cared for him a lot, so I never told anyone. I wouldn't even post it here, but sadly he passed away some years ago now. It was really sad. He was a nice guy. But it never would have worked anyway with my mom. My grandmother made me swear I wouldn't tell my grandfather we spoke to a Democrat at the store. I bought my niece a Nintendo Switch and my dad would have lost his shit. He tries to control the whole family's finances even when it comes to his 2 adult children. So I decided to buy it but never tell him. Well, Dad doesn't know I was sexually abused by the son of one of his friends, over a period of years. Mom does. Can't let him know. Despite his age, he'd go full-on Clint Eastwood getting even, and it's pointless. My dad grew up pretty rich but was the youngest of 13, so by the time he came of age there wasn't much for him. No big deal, worked his way through college. It was the 80s back when that was doable, and that's where met my mom. My mother grew up inching on the poverty line, and so when it was time for the wedding, my dad apparently really wanted her to pick absolutely any wedding dress on earth that she wanted, no matter the cost. My mom, having a tighter understanding of money, bought one that had already been worn. She apparently never told him that. They're both in their 50s now and made me swear to never tell him either. When I was 14 we went for a family bike ride. I got to the car first, dropped my bike, got the hider key and went to move the car as a joke, it got stolen kind of joke. Drove right over my bike. Told my mom, and we told my dad that it got bent going off a sweet jump. The bike store guy didn't believe it, but he was a family friend and gave us a rental at a discount. Like 20 years later we finally told him the truth. Now he has dementia, and thinks it got wrecked off a sweet jump. We don't tell him the truth. Swapped out the salt in the salt shaker at my parents' house for a low-sodium alternative. Told my mom so she could deny it tasted different in case my dad ever said anything, he hasn't. Edit. Since this got more attention than I ever expected, I felt it was my duty to relay some important info that people smarter than me below have mentioned. To be clear, I'm not a doctor in any way. If you are thinking about doing something similar, make sure you consider if someone is on any type of medication, especially for blood pressure. As always, consult a doctor or medical professional. The added potassium often found in these alternatives can be an issue for some people, and everyone's body reacts differently. Especially if the person you're trying to help currently has a large sodium intake. The fact I exist. The other day on Thanksgiving my dad found an opportunity to look at me and whisper, "Did you bring any?" while making a joint smoking gesture. I nodded and said I was gonna take the dogs out soon. He met me in the backyard, where I had already lit a small pile of leaves in the fire pit. He requested a single hit of marijuana, to which I obliged. I made him put eye drops in and stand in the fire pit smoke for a few seconds to cover the scent. Mom didn't have a clue, lol. Can't wait to see these responses. Mine is that when I was young, I took my mom's wedding ring to the park, and hid it because I thought it was like treasure, and if I put a stick in the sand where I buried it, I'd be like a pirate finding the treasure I hid. I never found my bounty, lol. Lesson learned, tears of joy. I told my dad first, he would just keep buying my mom replacement wedding rings over the years. Nothing like insanely pricey, but just really pretty rings with different gems she'd like. We never told her, and he kept buying the rings. Which was a win-win for everyone. I eventually fessed up over a Thanksgiving where we were telling random stories. Nice try, Mom, we're not telling you what happened at the bar in 2015. Well, my parents divorced when I was quite young, and around age 14 I happened upon a substantial stash of pot in my mom's house. She wasn't angry about it or anything, and I knew she wasn't a stoner or anything, it was just a one-time thing she'd gotten from a friend. But as she correctly pointed out, if I ever told my dad, he would do everything in his power to get full custody of me, and I wouldn't get to live with her anymore. Now that my brothers and I are all adults, I can tell that story all I want, but yeah, I kept that secret. How I'm the only reason my parents didn't end up homeless. My uncle was a drug addict, he's clean now, and my mother kept bailing him out of his drug debts. She didn't want my father to know about this, as he'd have kicked my uncle to the curb immediately, so I bailed him out financially for a few years. The cherry on top being during this time my father often made passive-aggressive comments about how I didn't pay board. I offered many times but my parents outright refused, so I had to bite my tongue hard sometimes. I was the one that took my mom to family court to change the schedule. My dad was just the proxy. My dad has kept my relapse from my mom. I'll make it this time, I swear. It even feels hollow coming out of my head. I don't know he thinks I can do it, or he just doesn't want to break her heart. Knowing he hasn't told her and seeing how, not disappointed or angry, just flat and kind of sad he looked has stuck with me. I'm in my 30s and I genuinely just want to make my dad proud. So, at least for today, I'm gonna by staying sober. Edit. Thank you, I appreciate y'all's encouragement. I have a support group around me and I have been sober for about 4 months this time. One day at a time. I know dad's hated me since his mom showed too much love for me after I came home from the hospital. This is a silly one, but years ago my dad was okayish with dogs but absolutely germophobic when it came to them. Still, because me and my mom begged, we got a dog, with strict rules about where the dog was allowed, washing hands, etc. One fine day when we were waiting for my dad's coffee to cool down on the counter and walked back into the kitchen to find the dog standing up on her hind legs licking out of his cup. We just quietly washed the cup and got him a new one, never told him. He would have thrown out the mug, and it was one that I got him out of my own savings for Christmas when I was in 2nd grade, so I would have been upset if he threw it out. To this day he still doesn't know, and would still probably throw out that mug if he ever found out. Yes, he still has it. The first Christmas after I moved halfway across the country, MA to TX, I surprised my mom at her work. It killed my dad to keep the whole thing a secret, but helped me play the "she just started a new job and can't take work off" card. Best secret ever, and her reaction went straight to Facebook equals D. After college I was really struggling financially. Despite having a real job, I was grossly underpaid and was living in my truck. My mom was in charge of the household budget and managed to squeeze a couple extra $100 per month to pay my car insurance, afford gas, and help me buy some new dress clothes so I could interview for and have clothes for a better job. Dad wanted to cut me off entirely so I could learn to take care of myself, but missed the fact we were in the middle of a recession. She also sent me weekly care packages from work which were full of food and things that I needed to live, hedge fund, so they had nice snacks and basic hygiene amenities for using the gym in the building. He still has no idea that she did this, and it was 20 years ago. When I was a kid, my older sister, maybe 9/10 at the time, asked my mom if she could help her pull the car into the garage. My mom, not using her best judgment, decided to let her. Well, my sister stomped the gas pedal and drove the car through the back of the garage and into our kitchen. My mom told my dad, as well as the rest of us siblings, that she herself had driven the car into the kitchen because she thought she saw one of us out of the corner of her eye and panicked. It wasn't until years later that I was told the truth. My parents separated a few years after this incident and my dad didn't know the truth for a very long time. Like 10-15 years after the fact. My sister is now 35 and we all joke about it. Planned an international trip to see my dad who's dying of cancer. I usually only get to see them in person every few years. Talked to my mum to ensure the trip was okay and he'd be home. Drove up to their house. Asked him to Skype. Asked him if he wanted to see the house I was building back in my adopted home country. He said yes. So I turned the camera around and made it face the bedroom he was sitting in. Took him a few minutes to realize it was his house. Was quite shocked. So was I when I saw how frail he had become from the cancer. C's not safe for work tag. What kind of Alabaman answers are you looking for? Every once in a while, my dad is completely clueless about what to get my mom for Christmas, birthdays. When I lived with my parents I was around my mom a lot, so when we went out I would notice her admiring certain things. Wow, look at this beautiful diamond bracelet. I wish your dad got me things like this every once in a while, and I would pass the word along to my dad. When my mom received the gift, she would always be very touched and happy, and sometimes come and whisper to me, "See Wolf, I prayed for your father to get me this bracelet and God answered my prayers." She never knew that I was the tool being used to facilitate the answer to her prayers. Lolololol. When my daughter was 11 she was into using epoxy with crafts. My now ex-wife had told her to spread out newspapers before doing it. Well, she got some of the epoxy on the expensive granite countertop. She decides to get it off with sandpaper and scratches the counter. Daughter finally works up the courage to tell me. I replied, "It has been an honor and a privilege to be your father, but you are now a dead person walking. I got nothing for ya." A couple of years later we divorced, sold the house, and then she told her mom, who had never noticed. My older brother stole my mom's $60,000 wedding ring and gave it back to my dad during a very messy divorce. He said he did it because she didn't deserve it, and to show my dad his unwavering loyalty to him. An insurance claim got filed, paid out and everything. My mom still thinks she actually lost it and my dad still has the ring sitting in his safe 14 years later. Nobody on either side knows that I know exactly what happened. Taking that one to the grave, for sure. Divorce is some heavy shit. Not parents but grandparents. My grandpa is my best friend and we have a really good relationship. He is the kindest person I know. When me, grandpa and grandma go somewhere, usually a cottage, grandma insists on doing things how she wants it. Every time we agree to do it in her way, but grandpa does it in his way and then we will tell her we did it how she wanted it. We never told her but everyone is happy and me and grandpa usually have a good laugh. So it's our little secret. I'm on the other end. My ex didn't tell me I had a daughter until my daughter was 23 years old. I missed everything. I was arrested for marijuana possession and told my mother but never told my father. Me, my sister and my dad got the COVID vaccine. My mom is anti-vax. She doesn't know we got it. Wrecked my friend's car before I had a license, I was 15, and was escorted home by the police about 10 minutes before dad got home. Asked mom not to tell him as I would not see daylight or my driver's license until I was 18. She kept her promise but did own me for a bit. Thanks mom, you really saved my butt. My mom knows I falsified my high school grades in order to avoid getting hit by my father. I have North African Arab parents, you can imagine why I did that. My dad used a power washer to clean our family car and ruined the paint job. We still didn't tell my mom that it was his fault and just blamed it on a bad paint job. Found some cleavage pics that my mom sent to a random man years ago when she first started dating my stepdad. She knows I know but I have no intentions of saying anything because he did the same and he doesn't know I know that lol. Edit. Not his cleavage although he does have a nice pair for a guy. My little niece had a horrible friend when she was younger. She was my age and one time my niece and I were on my laptop just looking at somethings on Google and then she decided to watch some horrible porn with me and my niece. I tried to stop it but I was too shy. The same day my niece asked my sister, her mom, about sex and she explained that what we saw wasn't what normal sex is. We never told anyone that ever, not even her father. When I was 10, my older brother, 12, was bullied in middle school because we were poor and wore payless our entire lives. He fought back one day and was suspended from school. When my mom asked what happened, he didn't want to hurt her feelings so he lied. I told her what happened and she started to cry. The next day she took us to a shoe store and bought all 3 boys Nikes, which were very expensive, think Ken Griffey's. She made us promise to not tell our dad and if he asked, they were super cheap on sale. She bought us Nikes 2 times a school year even though they were way out of our budget because she didn't want us to feel shitty at school. I love you, Mom.